Hi, I'm Charlie, and today on Munching Around Milwaukee, my guest is Chef Nell Benton. Nell, good afternoon.
Good
I
afternoon.
can finally say that, it's afternoon. So Nell is the former chef owner of the National Café, and everyone in town calls it the National, and Bowls Milwaukee. Lori Friedrich, who is one of the senior food writers in Milwaukee on Milwaukee, said that if she were on a desert island, the chef that she would want with her is Chef Nell Benton. And you're also the author of a cookbook. And I know you kind of poo-pooed it and said, well, it's just one cookbook. And I said, so if you've written a cookbook and it's been published and you've made money and people have bought it, then, raise your hand. Okay. So it is a big deal.
Okay, thank you.
It is. So thanks for coming out. It's about 150 degrees here in Milwaukee.
It's very hot.
It's actually only 90, but in Milwaukee terms, it'll be 150 anywhere else because we're not used to 90. So we're inside today. But so you have a interesting and diverse background, to say the least. You've been all over the world. You've had you've done a lot of different things in your career, and you've owned restaurants. Your background is interesting, I would say. So let's start where we usually start. But before we do, why don't you tell everybody what we're going to be eating here today?
Sure. Well, yours kind of fell apart a little bit, so I'll show mine.
Okay.
I made some sourdough bread, and we've topped it with like a Tuscan chicken salad with some greens and topped with some basil.
Yum. So we will be munching on these while we're eating. I'll put my napkin on.
It's going to get really messy.
Now start at the beginning. So you were born in California.
Yes.
Moved to Green Bay when you were 5.
Yes.
You spent your summers in the UK.
I did. My mother is from the UK, so all of our relatives on that side were all over the UK. So we'd travel over there every year and see them.
And then you were schooled here. You went to school.
Yes, went to school in the States.
So talk about those early years and how they helped set the foundation for you moving forward.
Yeah, so when we go to visit our relatives in the UK, my grandmother had a house with a massive garden down in Devon, and she grew all of her own fruits and vegetables, and she was a great cook. So I would follow her around the property and help her pick various fruits and veggies, and then help her cook. And that kind of piqued my interest as to where my food was coming from and how to put it all together and live a bit more farm to table.
Right. Well, that's so. Were you cooking at the time, or you were just kind of absorbing?
Just absorbing as a child, and then when I was 14, I got a job at an old folks' home, serving them lunch and dinner, and that was super fun. So I got to work a little bit in the kitchen there, and that was my first kitchen job. And then I had many kitchen jobs after that. I worked in cafes, I worked in a variety of places, all through college, and even when I got out and got a job working with a refugee organization in Minneapolis. They were called American Refugee Committee. I still was doing food things on the side. Eventually, I moved to the UK, where I lived for a number of years, and I worked in finance. But again, working at catering companies on the side and just kind of keeping my foot in the door. And then eventually I came back to the U.S. in 2008 when the crash happened, and I decided to go to culinary school.
Well, before we talk about culinary school, because I didn't want to talk about that, this is a list of the places that I found that you either lived or worked in. Indonesia, Thailand, the Philippines, Egypt, all over Asia, India, and you just mentioned the UK. So that's a whole lot of learning and absorbing throughout your career. So are there any places where, I don't want you to go through each one of them, but say, when I was in X, I really enjoyed this, or really this was fascinating when I was there?
I always go back to Asia. Like my mind, when I think about the best food in the world, I think of Asia. Thailand, I've been to Thailand a number of times, and I think what mainly keeps me going back is the food. And it's just the use of really fresh, good ingredients, simple dishes just done so right, and not heavy. When I went to culinary school, I was always questioning the fact that we were learning, French, the French sauces and French technique and all of that. And I really wish that we had more Asian influence in our schooling. But I mean, I was able to do that when I was traveling, so that kind of made up for that.
So let's talk about culinary school. So I shouldn't say all. Culinary schools are different throughout both the country and the world. So talk about your program. How long was it?
Well, because I already had my bachelor's, this program was a year long, and it was down in Fort Lauderdale at the Art Institute, and it was good. It was a good springboard, and I had worked in restaurants so long that I had the basics, but this prepped me for being a bit older, getting into the food scene, and kind of moving ahead a little quicker than I would have probably if I'd worked my way up in the kitchen.
Did they end up placing you at the end, or they give you help, or
No.
you're pretty much on your own?
You're on your own, and I then moved back to Wisconsin to be closer to family, and then had a variety of jobs before the National Café opportunity came up.
Well, let's talk about those variety of jobs, because you did mention the refugee, you mentioned working in restaurants and kitchens and all over the place. So talk a little bit about some of those other experiences leading up to, and we will talk about the National, but some of those things that you both interesting, different, not your everyday. I mean, working in a refugee organization, probably not something that the majority of people that are walking around doing.
Yeah, it was. I loved it. It was a really interesting job. It was a hard job. I was in refugee camps in West Africa and Southeast Asia, and you don't come back to your life in the States and think about let's go out for happy hour anymore. Right. It just changes your perspective on what's going on in the world and the suffering that humans are going through. So I loved that job, but I was there for 4 years, and it was time to move on. I really wanted to explore living in the UK for a while, so that's why I left that one. When I moved to Milwaukee, after being in culinary school in Florida, I worked I made cupcakes at a little cupcake shop down in Brookfield, and then I worked for Saz's. I worked for Thirst and Vine. And
In Shorewood?
In Shorewood.
Okay.
Yep. And I worked my way up to exec chef at Thirst and Vine, and then the opportunity for the National came along.
All right, let's talk about the National. So the National Café, or the National as everyone in town calls it, has been around how long?
Since 2008.
Okay, since 2008. And it's, for the most part, up until a certain point, it was just breakfast and lunch.
Yes.
I know somewhere towards the end there was the National at night came into play.
Well, what happened was I was doing so much catering. I did full-scale catering, weddings, and we also did farmers markets, that it was too much. I just couldn't do all of it. And I decided that, breakfast and lunch was great, and then the catering, I didn't want to do dinner as well. I was already working insane hours, and I never really knew how to put limits on things. So, no, by the time, by like 2015, I had a good handle on the workload and what projects I wanted to do and how much I wanted to be open. We were 7 days a week at first. We closed on Mondays finally, which was great. Yeah.
Okay. So talk about the story of buying the National for $100.
So a friend of mine sent me the story, and I looked into it, and I had been there once before, and my sister kind of pushed me into applying with Michael Diedrich, the previous owner. Mm-hmm. So I went through we did a round of interviews and did a business plan, and it seemed like a really good fit. He really wanted somebody who would be a part of the community down there, and keep the staff on. And there were numerous criteria that you had to meet, and it would bring the price down. Mm-hmm. So I think it started at $10,000, and then every everything you met brought it down a little bit, so it ended up being about $100, which was great.
So you take over the National, and it becomes a place where people go. I mean, there's a gentleman who lives here in the building. He said, "Oh, that was my go-to. I went there all the time."
Yeah.
And I was telling my wife, worked at the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, and they catered, or they had you cater, a lot of their meetings all the time.
Yep.
And I heard an interview with you. You said some of your best clients were the nonprofits in the area, and that was, that's a great place because your food was good, it was healthy, and it beats, as we were talking, it beats the heck out of burgers and pizza.
Yeah.
So it was, and I remember we used to go on Sundays every once in a while, and have just have a nice breakfast.
Yeah.
It was great.
It was a really good clientele because there were schools and nonprofits around, and I loved the people that came in there. And on the weekends we'd have 80s songs playing, and people would burst into song all together. I mean, it was just a really fun, cool place, and I loved it. I loved it for the whole time I did it. It was exhausting, but it was super fun.
Tom, do you know any songs from the 80s? Two songs? Okay. We're feeding a couple people in the audience today, just a couple. But so the National, and then you also opened up Bowls Milwaukee.
Opened up Bowls with Andy Larson, and we started talking about it just before I reconnected with someone who is now my husband. And had I known that I was going to go on to get married and have a family, I would not have ventured into the 2-restaurant realm. But we got it off the ground, and just as I was having my second child, and that's when I decided that I was probably in over my head.
Why don't you tell a story that I heard where you jettisoned your phone?
I had not had a day off in about 2 weeks, and my husband and I were walking with my, she would have been about 1.5-year-old or maybe 1-year-old. And I got a phone call from my cook who was calling in, and I knew I'd have to go in to fill in at Bowls that night. And the National was open breakfast and lunch, and Bowls was lunch and dinner, so it was nonstop. And I tossed my phone, and I said, "That's it, I'm out, I'm done." And that got the ball rolling for me to sell the restaurant, the National, and then leave Bowls, yeah.
And you sold it to your longtime assistant?
I sold it to my long-term manager, and I sold it to her way under market value just to kind of give her a head start, and it was a good, profitable, solid business. But I had so much help in my life, and I had received it for $100. Now, when I received it for $100, it was not making any money at all, and it didn't for the first couple of years. And I paid off some debt associated with it.
Sure.
But yeah, I was happy handing it over to my manager, and it's still running strong today.
Yeah, it is. Can I just say, this is delicious.
Thank you.
Tuscan, what's the Tuscan part of it?
We've got sun-dried tomatoes, we've got Italian herbs, fresh basil, and I put a little bit of tomato paste, lemon juice in there.
Yum. I mean, now that you say sun-dried tomatoes and tomato paste, I go, okay, that's what I'm getting out of it. Chef Gregory Leone from Amilinda, James Beard Award-winning chef Gregory Leone from Amilinda, calls you the godmother of Amilinda and says Amilinda would not exist if not for you.
That's very kind. I don't totally agree. I think he would have found a way to make it work. But he reached out to me. We had done a fundraiser together, and I tasted his food, and I really loved it. And I loved talking to him. He was a great guy. And he reached out to me and said, could we sit down and chat about potentially doing a pop-up at your restaurant? So I said, sure, why not? I love people, again, have helped me so much in my life. I love to kind of pay it forward. So he did his pop-up for about a year at the National and got a cult following. And while he was doing that, one of the things about Greg that I don't know if a lot of people know, but he puts so much back into the community. He does a ton of fundraisers. He raises money. He's raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for local charities. So he really gives back.
He's very socially conscious.
He is.
but he does credit you with having letting them use the National for their pop-ups and developing the following. And so you mentioned something that I think is also interesting about Milwaukee, is that there's a lot of intermingling, a lot of chefs helping chefs. So who are the people that you would say these are my friends? These are the people that I've mentored, and mentored is a very broad term.
Sure. Or
someone who I was a mentee for, someone who helped me.
Right. I remember Sean Henniger, who had a pizza place, and he also did chocolates down on National. He now lives out of town, but he was my go-to. I always called him, my savior, and my Milwaukee guardian angel. Whenever I had a question about running a restaurant or where to find a certain ingredient or whatever, I'd go to him, and he was lovely. He always helped me. I loved working with Jan Kelly. We would do of Meritage.
Sure.
We would do fundraisers together, and she was just a fantastic human. Karen Bell, I always really looked up to her, and we've had some parallels.
Yeah, I was going to say there's some
lives.
Commonality between the two of you.
Yeah, she's lovely. I have the utmost respect for Dana of Flower Girl Flame.
Oh, sure.
The people that spring to mind are mainly females who are dealing with children and still making a go of their restaurants. Like, they're doing it. They're doing all of it. They're doing something I couldn't do. I could not do 2 restaurants and 2 kids. But I'm seeing women now be able to kind of tackle that. I'm super excited for Mary Kassman opening.
I was just there on Saturday night.
And we're going to go next week. In terms of mentoring, Molly Sullivan of Miss Molly's Pastries, she was the pastry chef at Bray's, and she did some baking for me. And then I helped her with her business plan, and she just had such a solid idea of what she wanted. And she opened Miss Molly's Pastries out in Wauwatosa, and that's an amazing place with excellent food. And she's doing that with 2 littles. So those are kind of some of my favorites.
Yeah, there's the one thing that getting to know some of the chefs in the area, getting to know more about the way the food scene operates here. There's not, I heard you talking about, I forget what it was, maybe it was your cookbook, that they were pitting you against each other. It was kind of this competition or something. But the chefs aren't doing that. They're helping each other. I mean, we were at Dim Sum, Give Some Dim Sum a few months ago. There must have been 25 chefs there. All name them. They were there. Kyle Knoll, Dan Jacobs, blah, blah, they're all there. Chef calls, you're there. Need help. Somebody needs to do a pop-up. Come on over. And Gregory Leone is very famous for that. I mean, come on over. We'll do. I know he does he's probably got the refugee. Does something with refugees in terms of having them come to the restaurant and
cook.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's just, but that's part of Milwaukee. So when we first moved here in 2010, I'd say the food scene was okay.
Yeah.
But it has just kind of exponentially taken off, and some people say it's because the chain restaurants don't come here.
Yes.
Because there's...
Or they closed up.
Right.
Yep.
Because there wasn't a market. Like, I remember Wahlburgers right down the road here. I never went one time.
Yeah.
Didn't even think about going. Because I could walk across the street to the Wicked Hop and get that burger that was just as good for about, $6 or $7 less.
Sure. I drove to Madison a lot back in the day because Madison had a better food scene than we did.
Right.
It has changed a ton in 15 years.
Well, that goes to the point I was going to make, is that there's just this feeling that rising tide raises all boats. We're going to work together. We're going to help each other. I'm not in competition necessarily with you because you're not going to come to my restaurant every single night. You're going to go to different places. And the more that goes on, it just feeds upon itself. And I mean, you see it in in any event that you go to where there's multiple chefs, they're all friends.
They're all friends, but there's a healthy amount of competition.
Always
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're always going to have that, and that's good. You want to have that because it spurs people to be better. But yeah, you definitely have a tight crew in Milwaukee, and chefs have each other's backs.
Yeah.
And they'll come together look at Flavors of Africa, which Yolande organized. That brought in 40 different chefs and restaurants. I mean, people really stepped up and put in a lot of effort and helped raise money for United Way. So that was one of my favorite events that I've done in the last few years.
So let's talk about what you're doing now. So because you're not a full-time chef right now.
No.
Yeah, you made that quite clear.
Yeah. Well, I'm a full-time chef. I'm just not a full-time restaurateur. Like,
Gotcha.
I'll always be a chef.
Right.
But I couldn't. No, I'm
Well
happy.
said.
I'm happy to be out of the restaurant scene, but I do miss the camaraderie.
Yes.
And sometimes I honestly feel survivor's guilt when I'm hanging out with my chef friends and they're in the thick of it and they're exhausted and they're thinking about money and ingredients, and I'm just like, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I have to go home to my family and watch TV. And what you are doing currently is that you're working in real estate.
Yep. I'm full-time in real estate.
And so your company, Shore West Realty, was the realty company that sold my house. We lived up in Shorewood.
Pretty.
Yeah. So you have any houses that you push around? You want to talk?
I mean, I always have houses, but if anybody needs any help with buying or selling, I'm happy to help. I'm here.
You also are doing. You mentioned Flavors of Africa. Some of the other things you're doing. You've done some pop-ups. You've done some catering. You've done some fundraisers. So talk a little bit about those.
Yeah, I've kept my foot in the door a little bit. I love doing fundraisers. I will never say no if anybody asks me to participate in a fundraiser. We did one for Hanan Refugee Organization. And I also like to do fun field trips. The other day I did a field trip to BelGioioso Cheese factories up in Green Bay. And It was Lori Frederick, AJ Dixon, Petra and Andy of Semolina.
We can edit anything.
Ashley Turner. We had Ashley Turner as well. And we drove up to BelGioioso, and we did a tour of their mozzarella factory. And I went to school with Gaetano Arricchio, who is the son of the gentleman who started BelGioioso here. And it was so much fun. We had a tasting after the fact, and then they served us lunch, and we learned all about their cheeses. And there's just a really good outfit. They employ 1,000 people up there. Wow. They are known to be really good employers, and I love their product. Their cheese is amazing.
I always assumed it was an Italian import.
No, it's up in Green Bay.
Well, that makes more sense. It's Wisconsin. We make cheese. Eat cheese, make cheese, love cheese. And I was just at AJ Dixon had her burger pop up yesterday. I would too.
Oh yeah.
And I felt so sorry for her because it was 90 degrees plus. She's under this tent right in front of a grill, so that the heat is being trapped inside the tent.
Yep.
And she's just sweating up Blue Street. But burger was fantastic. She had to put radishes on it, so
nice.
I'm going to have to implement that. All right. So now,
yes.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
It was a pleasure. I'm going to finish this in just a minute. It's a little hard to eat on camera, so I didn't want to embarrass everybody in the room by trying to eat it, but I'm going to eat it in about 2 minutes. Nell is a favorite of a lot of people in town, as you can tell by her recent trip up to finding out about cheese in Wisconsin. That sounds kind of redundant, but and the work that you do in terms of helping out and the fundraisers and stuff, plus your full-time job, which is a mother, and then your second full-time job, which is doing real estate. So I'm glad you're keeping your hands in it and your fingers all throughout the food scene, because your reputation precedes you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So thanks so much for taking the time to support Munching Around Milwaukee. Each week we do a show where we talk with one of our local chefs, restaurateurs, foodies, or food influencers. But this is the last show until about August because I'm on vacation for about another month or so. So I'm glad Nell could come and share a delicious Tuscan chicken salad meal with me and the audience out there. Tom? Oh, Tom's already cleaned his plate. So, because he's not on camera, so he can eat, he can eat like that. So, again, thanks so much. We'll see you next time.